And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Dr. Carol Ragle, who is bleeding out and had a near-death experience. Carol, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me and wanting to explore near-death experiences of odd kinds. So mine are definitely different than the normal rabble, I guess.
Carol, you've actually had two NDEs, so I want to start with your first one that happened in Peru, and I think you need to give us a little backstory first.
My first NDE was in 2004, and I had gone on a trip to Peru. I wanted to see Machu Picchu, and I left from Silver City, New Mexico, which was my home. It's about 6,000 feet there, altitude-wise. And we were going to fly into Lima, Peru, which is around 6,000 feet. And then we were going to fly into Cusco, which is your starting point down into the Incan Valley to go to Machu Picchu. And Cusco is about 10,000 feet. And I didn't think I would have any trouble with altitude, but some people do. And when you get off the airplane, they sell you coca leaves to chew and give you tea for the altitude, which I think might have been a factor in some of the things that were going on with me there. So we flew into Cusco, or flew into Lima, and spent the night, and then we flew into Cusco. And the next day we got up to start going on the tour, and we had a shaman on our tour group, which was a good thing for me because he basically saved my life. We went to a place called Sasiwaman, which means satisfied eagle or spotted eagle. And it was at the top of this hill, 10,000 feet. And the Incans believe in the three layers of consciousness, I suppose. And the eagle, which was the condor for them, was the spirit. And then Puma was man, represented man. And then the snake represented the earth. And so this Sasiwaman was this huge complex that had all those pieces ingrained in it. It was, they believe it was at least 30,000 years old, but there was some literature that came up to say that. And Viracocha in the 1400s was the person who inhabited it, who was the king, the chief, whatever that position would be, inhabited that area. And they believe the Inca Empire started back in the 1200s, but he's the one that they verify his name for being the big guy. So when we went up to Sasiwaman, the shaman told us to look into these stones, and they were all pieced together in a zigzag pattern for earthquakes. It was very beautiful, well done, very tight. And he said, we should look in these stones, feel along the wall, and feel where the right place is for you to look into the stone and get a picture, get a story of your life or what would be good for you to see. And so I felt along the stone, and when I got to the certain place and I looked in, all I saw was fire and arms and legs and chaos and screaming and yelling, and it was a horrible scene. So my other friends who went, there were three others, they got pretty stories, and I was not happy with my story. So I just thought, okay, just weird situation. And so we left from there and went down to the city. And so we got back to Cusco, and we went to a restaurant that was close to the pension that we were staying. And I started getting getting really sick, just really nauseous. And I thought, well, maybe it's the altitude. So I'm puking on the sidewalk as I'm going up to the pension, and I'm not understanding what's going on. But so I went and laid down in the room, and my other friends went on the rest of the tour. So at that point, I was going in and out of consciousness. And at one point, I was 3 or 4 feet above my body. And I turn around and look, and I'm bleeding out on the bed. So I'm laying in a pool of blood. And it was very disconcerting. And I just thought, okay, I guess I'm dying at this point. And I saw a whole entourage of Quichuans, Peruvian people, and they're called Quichuans, that's their native name, around me, and they told me, we've been waiting for you. And okay, and so it was very confusing to me. So so I just kind of blanked out, and I thought, okay, I'm out. So the next morning I wake up, and which I was surprised to, and there's blood all over. And so I clean myself up, and I go down to the main. We're getting ready to keep going on the tour, and the shaman takes one look at me, and he says, "You are in trouble." And he took me down into town, got me some pills, got me some things, and he put me on the front of the bus. And so I was sick. I was sicker than I haven't been that sick in a long, long time, and um, just barely in my body, holding on. And the first stop we went to, so we left from Cusco, and we're going down the Incan Valley down to Machu Picchu. And so the first place that we stop at is called Kenko, and I couldn't even get out because I could feel the violence and the horrificness that I'd seen in that original rock was in that temple. And it was a rock that was just hewn out from a bigger mountain. And there was a rivulet that went through it. And that's where they would make sacrifices and do rituals, but it was a temple for the dead. And it was before, in my knowing, when they finally told me at the end of the journey, it was a temple to the moon. So, so I couldn't even go in there, and it just felt very violent. So I started. So we kept going down the mountain, and the next place we went to was Oya Te Tambo, and it was the last place for Viracocha Pachacuti, who were the Incan chiefs. It was their last residence when Pizarro came in 1530 or something like that to kill them off and take all their gold and silver. So I was taken down to that place, and Oya Te Tambo, and the shaman put me on a slab there. I was just out of it. I wasn't even conscious. And the shaman put me on a slab, and he started doing ceremony to clear out whatever had been stuck in my system, what was ever holding on. And there was a condor that flew by, which was very unusual because their condors are pretty much extinct. And he was so surprised, but he gave whatever that negative experience was to the condor to take it off. And so after that, I felt better, and I could function. But what came down to it, when we got to Machu Picchu, I was told in my meditations, and they said that I was a high priestess in the house of Viracocha. And the Aztecs, they'd been in a drought, and the Aztecs came down and told Viracocha, oh, you need to start heart cutting, and that will bring and donate it to the land, give it to the land, and that'll make your crops come back. And he also used it for when the Spaniards came to try to protect them. So in that place called Cuenca, that was the women's temple of the moon, and that's where all the priestesses went. And women and men were equal before this heart cutting started. So this was the beginning of the heart cutting that I saw at Sacsayhuaman. And that was the beginning of that whole murdering of, they murdered all the goddesses, or not the goddesses, but the priestesses in the temple, and children, and they made me watch, and I was the last one because I was the high priestess for that time. And so the horrendousness of it is what made me so sick. And it was the land crying out for that layer of consciousness of just complete destruction and bloody horrendousness to be released. And so it jumped on me. And so then the shaman was the one to release it, which I was very grateful for because I was so sick. So if you go down into Machu Picchu, there's the Incan Trail. They talk about the Incan Trail, and there's stones all along that. And you can go to each stone and it has people's stories in it. So if you meditate on that stone, you get some history or whatever. So the stones are alive. The land is alive there, and it remembers. And so after that, the lesson was land guardianship for me. And so what happens when I travel and go different places, if I feel things like that, then I ask for my Incan elders to come in and help release that, because it affects everybody. If it's a real negative place, you're going to be affected by it. So that's probably now in Cusco and Lima, the little gifts that they take are the heart cutters, and it just floors me. I'm just looking at it, going, "That's what you remember about the Incans in Cusco, Peru." It's a horrendous thing, the representation of it, and how that goes out into consciousness. So for me, it's a consciousness thing, and having to relive it is pretty just destructive on my soul. I don't like it.
During your NDE, these Peruvians said that they've been waiting for you. Does that mean that they've been waiting for you to come clear the land?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Uh, yeah. It blew me away. I'm just going, what do I know about that? I don't, but they were waiting for the high priestess. They believed in, they know that we have reincarnation. They were waiting for the high priestess from that time to come back and clear the land.
Do you think your shaman understood this about you as well?
No, I don't think he did right at, at the beginning, but as I'm working down, we're spending this time together at these different temples. He started getting that I was somebody special that he needed to pay attention to and help support. When we got done with the trip, we came back to Cusco, and we actually went back with the shaman to the place and cleared the land there. Did kind of, my friends and I went back and did a land clearing there, being the person who was one of the originators of what happened. It's so upside down from our own philosophy. I was raised Christian background, so it's like, okay, this is pretty interesting. So
Since this was a past life for you, do you feel that after all of this happened, you changed in some way?
Oh, yes,
Mhm.
definitely.
How?
Oh, I became more conscious of energies in different places. I've traveled all over the world, and so I can pick up if there's disharmony or misaligned energy. So, so then I go in there and call my um, teach ones in, and we clear the land and we clear whatever is disharmonious. So, so the land spirits can feel safe in their evolution because it holds negative energy. It's blood. It's the blood of countless people that were sacrificed in a real scary way, you know. So
All right, well, let's move forward to your second NDE.
the second one was um, in November of 2007. And it was in New Mexico. And I was still living in Silver City, New Mexico. And I'd been sick. Um, the winds were terrible, they were ferocious. And um, we had valley fever. And I had been treating a lot of people besides myself. We all contracted valley fever in Silver City, New Mexico, because the winds were blowing it out of California. So we were all pretty sick. So I was sick on oxygen for about 6 months. And but I was feeling better. And this was the fall, and I was going to go ride my horse. Um, and which was about 20 miles away from where I lived. And so I got, so I was in my little truck, and I was driving that way, and I go under a bridge, and um, up the road, there's somebody fooling around on the side of the road. And that's pretty common in New Mexico, dirt bikes, something like that. And so but all of a sudden, they pull up in my lane, and it's somebody on a Harley, and they are kind of at the rise down the road from me, and it's 65 miles an hour there, and I'm going, okay, what is this guy doing? Is he going to play chicken? Um, and so I just kind of keep driving along, because if I pulled to the side, I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I just kept driving along, and the guy revved his engine and went straight for me and ran into me. So he rammed the front end of his bike right where I was, where my face was. He was going to take me out. He was a suicide, and he was going to take me out with him. And so he ran his bike straight into the truck, and my truck actually bent around me and protected me from this guy, from the worst of it. I should have been dead. I basically gave over and said, okay, guess I'm going home today, because I didn't know what else to do. So there was nothing else I could do. So his head hit on the windshield right here in front of my face. And but I had closed my eyes at that point, because I didn't want to see the blood and guts and whatever. And so I had my eyes closed, and when I opened, I was still there. I was in the truck, and 20 feet off to the left, there was these 20-foot flames. And 20 feet off to the straight left was this guy, and he was laid out perfectly with his arms straight out, and then one leg straight and the other one, the left leg straight out, and the right leg, I could tell it was broken, and the right leg at a crook. And um, and so it was a perfect triangle between us. Of course, I didn't put any of that together at that point, because I had a grade 4 concussion, and it broke my hand. But that was it, which was unusual. I should have been dead. And so somebody, we had a good witness. Somebody came and took me to another car to sit there and to wait for the ambulance to come. And as I'm sitting there, I hear this horn, and they talk about the horn of Sarunas, I guess, but the wild hunt, the horn. And I heard this horn, and I'm going, okay, I didn't know what it meant. And then I saw these hellhounds come in, they appeared, and they came in and they picked up this soul that had just tried to commit suicide on me and took it away. So they come with a meat wagon because they said that there was one dead, but they thought it was me, I guess. And so I ended up going to the hospital, bouncing along, getting back to the hospital. And what I found out later was that the people who came to the site, they had to go through counseling because it was so weird. It was like a sacrificial, like a devilish kind of sacrificial rite, because of the positioning of everything. And there was no blood. There was no blood. His head, I could tell, was huge, but there was no blood, and he was laid out in this perfect position. Well, later I was telling one of my friends and about that, and she said, "Oh, that's the hanged man. That's the hanged man in the tarot, and that's the position of the suicider, the murderer, the person who is going to hell, so to speak." And so there's a whole history on the hellhounds, and that they take these people who do not belong in society, these beings, this consciousness, these souls, and they take them to a place where they can't come back. And so in the Christian religion, there's 9 levels of hell. And the 7th level is the place for murderers, tyrants, blasphemers, sodomites, and suicides. And so that's where he was taken. So, and now occasionally I've heard, the horn, and I wonder who's coming to pick him up, so it's interesting. So, and there's a lot more about, we all read the book Hound of the Baskervilles. Did you read that?
Maybe.
Yeah. Sir Conan Doyle wrote it, and it was about the hounds, the hellhounds. And Hell was the sister, that was her name. She was the sister of, in the Norse mythology, she was the sister of Thor and Loki under Odin, and she protected Hell, kept those beings in there. So there's a whole historical about it that's pretty interesting to look at. But yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Did you ever find out any information about this person? Because I'm curious if the hellhounds came for him just because of the suicide, or he was, he did terrible things during his life.
I did inquire, and he had been a drug addict, and he was, I think, 50 at the time, and he supposedly was recovering from drugs, alcohol, that sort of thing. And but that's all I knew about heard about him. And then they wanted to make a shrine in New Mexico. They do shrines on the roads, for people who are in car accidents and stuff. And they wanted to try and say that I pulled out in front of him, but luckily I had really. And luckily I had a really good witness, and the cop did a really good report. And they didn't put it in the paper, which I thought was interesting. And so I called him and I said, "You have to put this in the paper, so people know what really happened." So they put it on the front page, which was great because I was a doctor in that town. I can't have this background stuff going on. So it was interesting.
What did the hellhounds actually look like?
There was a whole entourage, probably about 15, 20 of them, and they looked more like wolfhounds. They were large, more like wolves, just a bunch of angry wolves. And you wouldn't want to be facing them. And in some of the literature, it says if you can see them, they're coming for you. Well, they didn't come get me, so I was grateful. But but in looking at them, it was very interesting to see them go through and
Now,
pick up that soul.
did you see the driver of the motorcycle's astral body or his spiritual body outside?
Yeah, I saw just the hovering of his spirit outside of his body. Yeah. But I was so damaged just from being hit so hard that it was trying to sort out what was going on there because um you know this guy just tried to commit suicide on me and take me out with him. I mean, I was very offended. Are you kidding me? Just out of the blue, let's kill Carol today. um it was quite the shock.
When you witnessed the hellhounds and this happening, were you outside of your body?
I could have been. I know I was looking to the side and I saw the physical body, and I could have been. So, yeah, yeah, it was just very strange all around.
Is there any way you can describe what the horn sounded like?
It's a long, drawn out. If you've ever heard any of like the Tibetan horns, they have those long horns and they'll something like that.
You said that you've heard them after this as well, right?
I have. I've never heard it before, and I never even really got it. We aren't steeped in Norse mythology um, or Kichin Inca, philosophy, and so um, I did some research on it to see because it was so significant, that horn. And I guess that the before the hellhounds come through, it's kind of like a train. They do the horn before the train comes through. Well, that's what they did, and I've heard it several times after that. And I always wonder, I wonder who they're taking.
Where were you when you heard this?
I was here in South Dakota, yeah, a couple different times. So, but it was just like I was just doing my day, and then I heard the horn, and I'm going, I just made note. I wonder who they're taking. So, because it doesn't bother me, I was very happy for them to take that guy. He didn't need to be around to harass anybody else. And what I learned from this was after that, in my practice, I got better with discerning um, thought forms attached, possessions attached to people. Um, just kind of different innuendos of how spirits are attached to human beings, and the negative ones, the ones that aren't supposed to be there. In fact, I could tell you a little story in my practice that happened if you're interested.
Sure. Let me ask you one last question
Okay,
about this before we move on.
sure.
Do you think as a result of your NDE, this is a new ability that you have, that occasionally you'll hear this horn and you'll go, uh-oh, somebody in my town is, being picked up
Definitely.
by the hounds?
Definitely. It made my sensitivity to it greater, where I'd already had the land with the land. And after this, I could definitely pick up easier on people. And so I started doing like past life therapy
Hmm.
for people, and from the land guardianship, to work with some of that stuff that comes up, like old ticks or um, different things that would claustrophobia, something like that, go into the past life and work through that to help them feel better, to relieve them of that burden, let's just say. And so then this was the next step in with the hellhounds in working with possession and thought forms and things like that attached to them.
All right, what's the story you were going to share with us?
Okay. So the story that came up after that, and this was here in South Dakota, is I had a client come in, and he'd been a regular client, and he he said his joints were really hurting and he was really not feeling good. And he had, and I said, okay, well, let's give you a treatment. And he really liked acupuncture and liked what I did. So we do the treatment, and he goes, oh, by the way, doc, I wanted to tell you, I go and work on my second job. I work at apartment complex and work with people there. And on my way over there last night, I ran into this kid who had committed suicide, 25 years old. He'd blown his head off. And so, and he was really, my client was very disturbed by it, needless to say, but he just kind of by and by mentions it to me. And I'm going, okay, wait a minute. We got to look and see. So the kid who had killed himself, this guy was the first person he'd seen. So he jumped on him, and he knew that he was going to be coming to me, because spirit kind of knows more things than we do on this level. And so he jumped on my client, and I'm going, okay, we have to clear this guy off of you. This is not good. And my client's very religious, and this would be a weird thing for him. And I said, well, just visualize this pillar of white light, and we're just going to help this guy move on. I didn't say he was attached to him because that would freak him out. So we start working with it and moving, and it's really heavy. The energy is really, really heavy. And we keep moving and we keep moving. And so we finally get that off of him, and the guy feels much better after the treatment because this entity is off of him. So I'm asking while he's getting the acupuncture and he's sitting there, and I'm asking spirit, what's going on with this? And what they told me was this guy committed suicide, and he went down to the 7th level of hell. He gathered all these suicides around him, jumped on this guy. So we cleared about 100 people out of 7th level hell to get them moving on in their spiritual growth, getting them to the next level. So it was very interesting. I was exhausted after that, but it was very interesting.
Carol, do you think the offense of taking one's own life is so terrible that a person deserves to go to hell?
I think sometimes people are in so much pain in their life. That's why they choose that option. I feel that people have constructed their own levels of hell and have shamed their own selves to go into a static position somewhere, and it's a disservice for themselves.
Are you basically saying that hell is self-created? It's not a punishment?
Yes, it's not a punishment. And I think we've been indoctrinated for so many thousands of years that this is what hell is. And I don't agree with it. The hellhounds come and pick up who they need to pick up and take them where they need to go. I mean, there are malevolent entities out there that need to be chilled out and kept away from the collective. But for the most part, some people are just in so much pain that they can't stand being here anymore. And so they check out and they make a prison for themselves.
Do you think from either one of these NDEs, you got any other new abilities that could be considered psychic?
I think my dreams have become more lucid. I think I'm more connected to spiritual aspects. I know sometimes spirit will just talk to me right out and tell me stuff about a situation. If I'm able to help clear or clean the arena of whatever that is, I'm definitely different from when I started. So and I was a very fearful person when I was young because my mother was very hell and brimstone Christian, and at 12 years old, I decided that I wasn't. I was an agnostic because during confirmation, this priest was doing his whatever, and I didn't feel a thing. And I said, "This is all bull. This isn't right." So I've come a long ways in being, hearing and working the way of spirit at this point. So, and I like working with people who come in with very problematic issues and working them through whatever they need to work through. So,
Do you fear death?
no, not at all. Not at all.
If you had a friend that was suffering over the loss of a loved one, what type of advice would you give?
I would work with them energetically and talk to them about they're just on the other side of the wall. They're there. They're still there, and it's you have to work through your own issues around it. We've been, I think, religious-wise, we've been isolated from the other side. Like Shintoism, they worship their relatives. I think the Oriental different spiritual practices are more integrated with their family and their loved ones, and so they don't feel as great a loss. But I think Christianity is just kind of put it, you're in the box, you're gone, you're dead, dead and gone. And I think it's a disservice because they aren't, they're around. My mother comes and haunts me every once in a while. I'll smell her smoke because she smoked 3 packs a day. And so, but I'll smell cigarette smoke and it's like, oh, mom's around. So, and after her death, she came around and she was very happy. And it was the mother that I came in with, that I wanted to be with. She corrupted her own self over time, but it was nice to see her as a good person, a happy person.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Yes.
What's the best way to
Definitely.
contact you?
Probably through email. Let's do it that way.
Can you share your address?
It's dr.caragle@gmail.com.
Do you have anything that you're working on that you want people to know about?
I've written a book, Chinese medicine from a Western viewpoint. So I do have a book on that. And then I'm working on more of the esoteric for another book, but I haven't gotten through that. So I'm working on it.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
I suppose I'd say misaligned energy always seeks redemption. So it's really important that you keep a positive attitude and love for yourself and love for life and keep putting those positive vibrations out in the world so we can all live in a better place.
Carol, thank you for your message and thank you for being my guest.
Yes, thank you. It's very good to meet you and thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.